This is alveolar wall thickness. It's not shunting, because that hadn't happened yet. It's not low altitude.
VQ mismatch.
It's not, it can be partly a VQ mismatch, but there's something specific about the AC membrane. Not perfusion, but diffusion. So it's a diffusion defect. Y'all with me? Y'all are gonna know these hypoxias, one way or another. No, it's coming. Okay, what does this say out of atelectasis? We've got these acini that are closed down, and you know we've got the same stuff that's going on. Bless you. And then excessive bronchial secretions. We have some of the same stuff that's going on, but when the bronchial secretions are the main problem, like towards the end of the pneumonia, then we switch over from a restrictive disease to more of an obstructive pattern at that point. And when the pneumonia is totally resolved, then they go back to normal lung function, unless they have COPD or the pneumonia has caused damage. Any questions about any of these? I'm not going to have you complete this chart. What I'm trying to get you to think about is when you look at certain clinical manifestations, they are occurring because of this stuff you can't see. Okay, so now we're at the patient's bedside. Was there anything in the chapter that I missed that you wanted to potentially talk about? You thought that I would say something about? There is one thing I want to add. Before you go on break, this isn't a slide, you're going to have to add it somewhere. But what I'm talking about is on page 254. So you know those terms we first talked about real briefly: double pneumonia, lobar pneumonia, interstitial pneumonia. Those terms have kind of been replaced by community-acquired pneumonia and hospital-acquired pneumonia. They don't really mean the same thing, but instead of talking about these kind of layman term names, we're going to say the patient has a community-acquired pneumonia because where did they pick it up at? Outside the hospital. And that's important. This patient didn't have pneumonia when they come into the hospital, but now they do. That's important too. So now we're looking at categorizing pneumonia as community-acquired versus hospital-acquired. Now, those are, to me, they're common sense definitions. Yes or no? You are going to need to know a couple of them, and I'm going to tell you what ones I want you to know right now. So there are several bacteria that are listed for community-acquired pneumonia. But the one that I want you to be familiar with, and is probably the most common community-acquired pneumonia culprit, is the Streptococcus pneumonia. And I won't want you to put strep, I want you to put streptococcus with a lowercase p, pneumonia. Now, Staphylococcus aureus, Haemophilus influenza, Legionella, Enterobacteriaceae, Pseudomonas aeruginosus, all of those are culprits too, but the most common one in the community is going to be Streptococcus pneumonia, sometimes referred to as pneumococcal pneumonia. Thus, the pneumonia vaccine is for pneumococcal pneumonia. So why do you worry about having strep throat? You think those organisms can slide down into the trachea and down into the alveoli and settle down there? Okay, and the most common cause of hospital-acquired pneumonia, there's a couple of them, but I'm gonna want you to know Staphylococcus aureus. And what is terrible about Staphylococcus aureus a lot of times?
Antibiotic resistant.
It's antibiotic resistant, methicillin resistant, and it spreads like wildfire. I was fine until I got into the hospital. What's the most common reason that infections are spread in the hospital? Not washing your hands. No true words have ever been spoken.
Didn't they say that it cultures in your nose? Isn't that a...
Staphylococcus aureus is all over. It's on our skin and stuff, and it doesn't hurt us because it...
into our own strand. It's other people's strands.
And it's supposed to be there. It serves a purpose. But we don't want staph on the skin to get into a cut and then get into the bloodstream and then the body not be able to fight it off. That's when we start running into problems. You've got to, they on the TV, they've got the chicken that's being cut up there. So there's a lot of staphylococcus on the chicken skin too. And then you get it in you, and then all of a sudden you've got an infection from that bacteria.
Why do they give you an ointment to put in your nose when you get stabbed? Like, I said, I don't know what it's called, but I said, like, it'll... It's what? Yeah, you have to put it in your nose to help. Yeah.
I'm not familiar. I missed something.
Yeah.
They give it to a lot of patients who test positive before surgery. They have to put that ointment in their nose.
Is it like an antibiotic or something?
Yeah.
Okay, well that makes sense. I'm just not familiar, but if it's an antibiotic to try to prevent a surgical infection. Okay, take a break real quick and then come back and we'll finish up. Well, no, it's not a dumb question. I just didn't know what you were, I've not heard of what you're talking about, or I'm not familiar with it.
It's Hillary. Like if they test positive for it.
Okay.
I was just curious on, like, I had a doctor tell me, because when I did cheerleading, I got MRSA, because MRSA is everywhere all the time. And they had me put it in my nose, and they said it cultures it or something, or like it helps decrease the spread.
And so when you say put it in your nose, I don't know what it is. That's what I'm. Okay. Okay, that's just antibiotic.
Yeah.
I guess it's in nose.
You're talking about MRSA, not staph.
Well, it's MRSA is methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and it is the strain that's resistant to methicillin. Now, there's another, vancomycin is the antibiotic that's, used for that. But, there are some vancomycin resistant Staphylococcus aureus strains.
But how does that affect, so if you get that, how does it get into your lungs? Like this?
From your nose?
So it goes from your nose and then it goes all the way down to your lungs and that's how you get pneumonia from it?
Yeah.
I was just curious because you know you have it on your skin and I'm like, how does it?
Well, one of the big things, with stuff getting into the lungs, the airways, the lungs, is at night when you sleep and you aspirate. And everybody has a little bit of aspiration whether they realize it or not. And that's one of the things that can prompt asthma attacks is gastric reflux, and then that leads to some aspiration, and then brings on an asthma attack.
And how does aspirin trigger an asthma attack? Because I read that in the book somewhere, or I heard about it somewhere.
It's just whatever's in the aspirin, and it's not an allergic type, but it's whatever's in the aspirin in certain patients triggers that response. And I don't know exactly, I'd have to do research on it myself, but if you, eat aspirin or take an aspirin for a headache, and then the next time you take that aspirin and you have a, shortness of breath and stuff, then you're probably having a reaction to the aspirin.
Did you tell us that? I read it somewhere. Did you hear about it? What aspirin causes an asthma attack?
I said it. I didn't
Yes,
say all that.
Mr. Roach taught us that. That's why
I knew I
you're not supposed to take like ibuprofen and any of that because it's an insect. You're not supposed to take it. Well, so do I, but I make sure I keep like my breathing treatment and stuff near me. Earlier when you said that pneumonia can cause damage, what kind of like damage can it cause?
To the alveoli themselves, it can weaken the walls, weaken the alveolar walls after the resolution.